Those are the original 11 tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, there is a 12th tablet that many people believe is a translation of an earlier Sumerian poem and is kind of like an addendum to it, but they also believe that it's like a prequel. So here's basically what's on the 12th tablet that is commonly sort of known in the library of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but is not necessarily known as a linear continuation of the story. The last tablet say that Enkidu is actually still alive despite having died earlier, right? Like that's like the whole point of the story. Because of this, its lack of integration with the other tablets and the fact that it's almost a copy of an earlier version, it's been known as this inorganic appendage, right? Gilgamesh complains to Enkidu that various of his possessions, the tablet is unclear exactly what, and different in translations include a drum and a ball, have fallen into the underworld. Enkidu offers to bring them back. Delighted, Gilgamesh tells Enkidu what he must do and what he must not do in the underworld if he is to return. Enkidu does everything which he is told not to do. The underworld keeps him. Gilgamesh prays to the gods to give him back, and Lil and Suen do not reply, but Enki and Shamash decide to help. Shamash makes a crack in the earth, and Enkidu's ghost jumps out of it. The tablet ends with Gilgamesh questioning Enkidu about what he has seen in the underworld. I don't know. I kind of like that little side story. It seems like a between a tablet 3 and 4 kind of vibe. You can throw that in there, just be like, hey, here's some of the wacky adventures of these two gay guys. I don't know. All that to say, this 11th tablet, the one that shows the flood, is very, very interesting because, again, this has a lot of similarities to the Abrahamic story of Noah and his ark, the animals 2 by 2, the dove that's released and shown as sort of the symbol of peace, that the earth will never flood in this way ever again. But there are some differences, right? Raining for 40 days, 40 nights. This was only 7 days. You know, the nature of the gods and how they sort of, deal with this. Obviously, in the Abrahamic faiths, the, Hashem or Yahweh is very, very different than the various gods and Lil and Shamash that appear in this story. So there are certain details that are very similar. Some people might even say that they're drawing on the same source material, that maybe there is, perhaps some original account that, details this great flood, that maybe both of these are drawing from. This version in the Epic of Gilgamesh is distorting and twisting and paganizing it, whereas the, Bible and the book of Genesis is keeping the true and authentic version in accordance with the word of God. This perhaps might be what Christians would say. Other people might say, oh, this was obviously a much earlier version, and, the Abrahamic religions copied this, that they were familiar with this, that the Jews of the time would have been very familiar with the Epic of Gilgamesh. I believe that there were versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh that were found even in the Dead Sea Scrolls by, that were put there by the Essene sort of ascetic Jewish travelers that didn't, try to interact with the Romans at all, that by pulling it out of the Library of Jerusalem before the invasion, they put it in these, sort of caves. And that's, the Dead Sea Scrolls as we know them today. Who's to say? I don't know. I don't know if they were copied. Again, there's pretty interesting things that seem to be similarities. But there's also a lot of differences, and you're like, every culture on Earth basically has a flood myth, whether you're in, Iraq, you're in Nineveh, you're in, Central America, Native Americans in the United States, Cherokee. They all have different flooding myths. Some of them flood the known world. Some of them flood the entire world. It rains for disparate periods of time. Obviously, how are you going to survive a flood? You build a boat. These people obviously have experience with seafaring. So it follows to reason that you would, build a thing that floats, and you need animals as well. So you would include the animals on the boat. So it follows to reason that if you experience a flood, or you're going to write about some type of great cataclysm that wipes out the entirety of humanity, a flood would be a logical, place to go. And then, of course, all of the ways to survive a flood would then follow to reason. The dove example is interesting. And then again, people also point out the serpent. They say like, oh, obviously in the Bible, you have the Garden of Eden, and the serpent comes and tempts Eve. And then here the serpent comes and is not necessarily being evil, right? Like the serpent is just doing what serpents do. Like it's in the nature of the serpent to sort of steal and be, mischievous. But it's not necessarily known to be satanic. Like, I think if this was going to draw a direct parallel with the Garden of Eden, in here you would expect the serpent to, go get the plant for him and then give him the plant, and he's young forever, and he's miserable, and he actually hates it, and he wishes that he could die, but he can't, and he's sort of, trapped in this vessel, this hell of immortality. I think that would be, more akin to the serpent that we see in the book of Genesis. But again, who knows? I'm not a scholar here. This is sort of my conjecture on the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, it is a beautiful story. It has made an absolute, it's made a huge impact on the way people have looked at mythology and literature ever since. It had a major impact on Homer and a lot of the, sort of the Greek stories and the Greek tragedies and the epics that Homer would write. He was very familiar with this text. Even in the Iliad, there's, stories of adventure and flooding and all sorts of things that you would find in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So another really, really interesting thing that we get from the Epic of Gilgamesh is the idea of the Anunnaki. Now, people kind of know the Anunnaki as sort of these like gods that exist in heaven that watch down. That's kind of been sort of tied into the Book of Enoch in a lot of ways. But the Anunnaki, as we see, are, exactly how the story is described. It is this, group of gods that live in heaven that sort of have like this hierarchy. And they, as a group, sort of dictate the governance of what happens to human beings on Earth. So, here's sort of like the hierarchy as we've sort of described it. You have Anu, who is the chief deity of the Anunnaki, the father of many gods. And Lil, this is the person that tried to destroy Earth with the flood, but also grants Utnapishtim the immortality for as a reward. Then you have Enki. This is the god of the underground ocean, magic, wisdom, and creation. This is a benevolent god who helps humanity and warns Utnapishtim that there's going to be a flood coming and to build a boat. And you have Ishtar. This is a complex deity, love, war, fertility, political power. This is the one that was trying to bang out Gilgamesh, and he said no, and then had a whole battle with the bull of the heavens. Shamash is the god of the sun and justice, associated with truth, law, order. Shamash is like the homie, always trying to help everyone out. And there's other ones, but again, all of these gods create what is known as the Anunnaki. And it just creates an interesting precedent in history how the Anunnaki comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh and then how it sort of has transformed. You sort of see like these quarrelsome gods that sort of exhibit human characteristics where they're angry, sometimes they disagree, they go back and forth, and they don't ascertain sort of the Abrahamic idea of omnipotence, omnipresence. They don't possess necessarily like the all-consuming power of the biblical God. Just interesting. And there you have it, folks. That is the Book of Gilgamesh. That is where it was discovered. That is where it was found and who found it and why it mattered so much to the people and why it matters so much now, right? This has been lost to time for thousands of years, discovered within the last 150, and has made a major impact to how biblical scholars look at their own faith, how they understand where the stories of their faith may or may not come from. And how it's possible that a lot of different stories are drawing on similar themes. Maybe it's intrinsic to who human beings are. Maybe it's fundamental to an event that happened in history that everyone's drawing on. Who's to say? Who will ever know? All that I do know is that sort of the things that make human beings humans and the things that we care about don't really seem to change that much. That is the most profound part. I mean, the world today and the world 4,000 years ago could not be more different. There's almost nothing that we do now that we would do then, right? It just seems like, can't even fathom. Some people believe that, Gilgamesh was a real king that lived roughly around the time of the creation of the pyramids. Like, just to give you an idea of scope and time. So long ago, right? And then you start to think like, oh, wow, Gilgamesh this whole time is so worried about immortality, trying to have some great legacy, trying to be famous, trying to be rich. He just wants to matter and exist in the world. And ultimately, the thing that he wants is going to kill him. It is going to be his, a quest that he goes on forever and, never really achieves, this idea of just being immortalized. But what he needs is his family and a wife and to be a good ruler and to help the people of his kingdom. And that is actually what matters, is tending to his garden and fulfilling his purpose as a human being on Earth. But we're still talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh all these years later. So maybe he did get ultimately what he wanted, to be immortalized into the fabric of history. Congrats, Gilgamesh.